Hello, welcome to my chapter of Woof. My name is Dudley Newmark and I am Faith and Lily's dad. I work as a HR director for a financial company who deal with lots and lots of processing of money from when you put a card into a machine or you pay for things online. So today I am reading chapter 3 from Woof, which is Purnell's Fish Shop. So I hope you enjoy it. Eric arrived at the park gates in good spirits. If that woman could read his writing, so could his mum and dad. He was in a hurry to get home and decided to take a shortcut through the park. Eric trotted through the gates and past the park keeper's house. He saw a notice saying, "All dogs must be on a lead." He quickened his pace. As he followed the path towards the pond, he was aware of smelling things before he saw them. The flower beds, for instance. The new paint on the bandstand. A litter bin, even. Eric resisted the urge to snuffle in the litter bin and kept going. Soon he caught the aroma of tobacco smoke and fish bait, and he came to the pond. The last fishermen were packing up their rods and other gear. One of them was smoking a pipe. One was tipping a tin of worms onto the earth bank. Eric came up behind him. He'd dug worms from that bank himself many times. He watched the worms go wriggling away. He felt the urge to kick his back legs in the dirt, and did so. Now Eric followed the curve of the pond. He overtook a man and a woman walking arm in arm. A big boy on a bike overtook him. The smell of water, he could smell it, made him realise how thirsty he was. It was all of that panting. But Eric had no wish to drink at the pond, though dogs did drink at it. There were crisp bags and Coca-Cola cans floating there. Usually, when he and Roy played football, they drank at the fountain. It was an old-fashioned one, with a metal cup on a chain, and if he remembered rightly, a dog trough. Eric left the pond and made a detour to the fountain. He had to cross the cricket pitches and climb a hill. By this time, there was hardly anybody about. He approached the fountain, lowered his head a little, and, a little self-consciously, began to lap the water. It tasted good, and it tasted different. Eric thought about this. The chocolate button had tasted different too, he recalled, though it was hard to say what the difference was. He paused and rested a while. Lapping was hard work. A man in a tracksuit went running by and made him jump. Eric drank a little more. He shook the drops of water from his furry chin. He sat back on his haunches. The park was now deserted. Overhead, the sky was turning an ever darker shade of blue, with red and brown and duck-egg green where the sun had set. A few stars were shining. Eric stared up at the sky. "I'm a dog," he thought. "Why is that? What's going on?" He tried to remember the dog project he'd done in the second year. Perhaps there was a clue there. He thought of the stories he'd had in the infants, where a witch would turn a prince she didn't like into a tree or a frog. He thought of rays from outer space. That was more likely. Perhaps the Martians were doing it. At that moment, the park bell began to ring. Eric remembered the message he was going to write and hurried off. He left the park through the top gates and went down Church Street. On the way, it occurred to him that there was an even shorter cut he could have taken. Dogs didn't need to follow paths or roads. He could have cut across the allotments and been home by now. Then, turning once more into Apollo Road, Eric caught a sudden whiff of the most marvellous smell. It was a smell of fish and chips, chicken and mushy peas, vinegar, tomato ketchup and pineapple fritters. It was Purnell's Fish Shop. They had everything there. Eric hesitated, then crossed the road and went up Union Street. It was hardly out of his way. He would just take a look. The light from Purnell's fish shop glowed into the street. Eric stood outside. A couple of older boys were sitting on the wall eating bags of chips. He recognised one of them. His name was Hopper. He was a fourth year in Mr. Hodges' class. Since Raymond Fletcher had left, he was the boss of the school. The other boy was the boy on the bike who had passed Eric in the park. He was dropping chips into his mouth as though they were grapes, and Eric watched him in fascination. He felt his mouth watering and had the urge to sit up and beg. The boy caught Eric staring at him. "You're a nosy dog," he said. "Hey, Hopper, look at this nosy dog." "Give him a chip," said Hopper. "You give him one." "No, you." "You." This went on for a while. Eric looked at one boy, then the other. It was like watching tennis. Finally, Hopper leant forward on the wall and held out a chip. Eric didn't hesitate. He loved chips. Besides, the chance to eat one of Hopper's was too good to miss. Hopper was the kind of boy who'd eat your chips, whether you offered them to him or not. Eric sat up, took the chip from Hopper's not entirely clean hand, and ate it. It was delicious. Again, it had that different flavour he couldn't quite find the words for. Then a man came out of the shop. He had a bottle of beer in his coat pocket and was carrying an open bag of fish and chips. That's a smart dog. Does he like fish? The man broke off a piece of fish and held it out. Once more Eric did his trick, sat up, neatly took the fish and ate it. Lovely. How about a pineapple fritter? Said the man. He removed a separate bag, wrapped in newspaper, from his other pocket. I'd sit up for that, said Hopper. Eric ate the piece of fritter he was offered. He felt pleased with himself. For a second time it occurred to him that being a dog might not be all bad. He could make a living like this if he had to. But now Eric could hear and feel a curious thumping going on behind him. He spun around, but there was nothing there. He heard it again, and again he turned, and this time found the answer. Of course, he should have guessed it. It was his own tail wagging. At this point, an old woman in carpet slippers joined the group. She was wearing an apron and carrying a bottle of lemonade. Hopper's friend said, "Let's see if he can catch." He tossed a chip in the air. Eric leapt, opened his mouth, and to his own surprise, caught it. Usually he wasn't all that good at catching. Then Hopper threw one, but this throw was wild and Eric missed. He sniffed the chip where it lay on the pavement. It was covered in dirt, quite uneatable. He turned away and looked expectantly at Hopper. "Got nice manners for a dog," said the old woman. "Wouldn't eat him off the floor, will he?" Just then the man and the bull mastiff that Eric had met earlier came walking up the street. Eric was reluctant to leave. He was enjoying himself. A game where you caught things and ate them, that was better than rounders any day. But the mastiff was barking again and growling too. Eric didn't hang around. He barked once himself and hurried off the way he had come. From Apollo Road, Eric made his way up Clay Street. Shortly after, he found himself outside his own house. Now he'd begun to regret the time he'd wasted. Writing a message in Emily's sandpit was still a good idea, but the sandpit was at the back of the house, and the side gate was locked. Also, it had become quite dark. If he were able to write, could his parents see to read? Also, all that running, climbing hills, jumping for chips had worn him out. His little legs felt like lead. Eric sat on his haunches and peered through a gap in the fence. As he did so, he noticed two things. 1. His mum was in the garden watering the roses. 2. The front door was open. That was enough for Eric. In no time at all, he'd changed his plan. He would sneak into the house instead, if he could, and hide in his room. He could write the message in the morning. His chances would be better then. He could reach the back of the house. It would be light. Besides, there was the prospect of curling up on his own bed and no bull mastiff to bother him. With this in mind, Eric was encouraged to try his luck. The first stage proved easy. He wriggled under the bottom rail of the fence and crept along behind the cover of the rose bushes. His mum was humming a tune and had her back to him. He reached the safety of the hall. Then there was his dad to watch out for, but that proved easy too. He was up in the bathroom shaving. Postmen have to get up early, and Eric's dad often shaved at night to save time in the morning. Eric crept upstairs to the landing. His bedroom door had swung to, so that it looked more or less shut. He nudged it open and went inside. The light from a street lamp shone faintly through the curtains. His pyjamas, that Eric was supposed he would never wear again, still lay in a heap on the floor. He was surprised once more by how big everything looked. The huge chair with its huge clothes on it, the giant bed looming above him. Eric gathered himself and leapt onto the bed. He turned round a few times to find a comfortable position. He put his head on his paws. The air was heavy with the smell of blanket and sheet and Airfix glue. There was a half model of a moon buggy on the dresser. He yawned. This is better, though. If Dad looks in there, I'll be in trouble, he yawned again. I'm a dog. A dog. What'll Mum say when she knows? What'll Roy say? Brilliant, Roy'll say. Eric heard a faint sound downstairs. It was the front door closing. He felt his eyelids growing heavy. Will I dream human dreams or dog dreams? He thought about his auntie's cat, the way its whiskers twitched when it was dreaming. He closed his eyes. At that moment, Eric began to feel a curious tingling in his paws. This, although he didn't know it yet, was his paws turning into hands and feet. He felt an itch around his neck. This was the fur beginning to get shorter. He felt his nose becoming warm and dry, his ears becoming flat against his head. Eric opened his eyes. He didn't move at first. The thought in his mind was, I'm turning back into a boy. But as soon as the itching and tingling stopped, he shot out of bed and pulled back the curtains. Light from the street lamp poured in. Eric felt a tremendous urge to laugh and shout. No more being thrown out of the house. His troubles were over. He was himself again. He was back. Then suddenly he had another thought. He was standing there with no clothes on. What's worse, he'd been running around the streets with no clothes on. Girls had seen him. Eric's face grew hot. Hurriedly, he drew the curtains across, grabbed his pyjamas and put them on, and he got back into bed. Gradually after that, his embarrassment faded. It wasn't so bad when he thought about it. He'd been covered with fur after all. And if he'd had a t-shirt and shorts on, he'd have looked sillier. Besides, nobody knew it was him. Eric yawned and yawned again. There was a jumble of thoughts crowding in his head, but he was immensely weary. He turned over on his side. Wait till morning, he thought. Wait till Roy hears. He closed his eyes. Brilliant. And fell asleep. That's the end of my chapter. I hope you enjoyed that. Keep up the good work and keep up the reading.